This talk was given by Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, February 21st, 2026. We're going to continue with Finding Your Buddha Smile, coming home to what Zen is really all about. But the chapter number 5 we'll look at today is rather short, so I'd like to begin with a little bit of our culture, that is Zen culture. I'll read a little from the selected poems of Su Tong Po, translated from the Chinese by Burton Watson. Let me tell you a little bit about him. This is from Watson's introduction. The Sung period was strikingly modern. He was probably one of the great, if not the greatest, Sung dynasty poets. He got very engaged with Zen midlife. Like many of the noted poets of China, he was a diplomat. He went into the civil service. That was the route for any really literarily gifted person at the time. Many of them got banished because they tended to speak out about what the government was doing when it was harming people. So Su Tong Po did get banished. This happened several times, I believe. Like all of us, he dealt with illness and injustice. Anyway, a little bit to go on. By Sung times, the Chinese had gotten up off the floor and were sitting on chairs, contraptions that came in from the West with Buddhism and spread slowly throughout Chinese society. They were reading printed books, drinking tea, carrying on at least part of their monetary transactions with paper money, and experimenting with explosive weapons, gunpowder being one of the inventions of the Chinese. Many of them lived in large cities. The main Sung capital, Kaifeng, was almost certainly the largest city in the world at that time. And they traveled freely about the empire by boat, horse, carriage, or palanquin over an elaborate system of roads and waterways. In their way of life, their values, and their interests, the Sung people were in many respects far closer to modern Western life than European men and women of the same period. So that's around the year 1000 to 1100, somewhere near is what we're talking about. The work of Su Shi, and that was Su Tong Po's actual name, the greatest of the Sung poets, his literary name was Su Tong Po, well illustrates these qualities. He was born in 1037 in Te-shan, a town situated at the foot of Mount Ome in present-day Sichuan province. His remote family background is uncertain. There is reason to believe his people were connected with the local weaving industry. His grandfather was illiterate, and his father, Su Shun, did not begin serious literary studies until he was in his late 20s. Though his father's older brother passed the civil service examination and became an official. His mother was from a prominent family, an educated woman, and a devout Buddhist, and undoubtedly had a great influence upon her son's development. He had only one brother, Su Shi or Su Tzu Yu, 3 years younger than himself. He and his brother were educated by their parents and at a private school in the neighborhood run by a Taoist priest, and by 1056 they felt confident enough to go to Kaifeng, which was the capital, take the government civil service exams, and their father had taken them earlier and failed. But he accompanied his sons to the capital. The boys passed their final examination with distinction, and in the following year passed the second, receiving like the highest degree. And then at the same time, Su Shun, their father, won private recognition for literary ability. So his mother died in 1057. The sons returned with their father to Sichuan to observe the customary 3-year mourning period. The three journeyed then to the capital in 1060, where Su-shun, the father, received an official appointment, and his sons, after passing the special examination the following year, were assigned to posts in the provinces. Thus the so-called three Sus is what they were known as. Father and two sons were launched on the careers that would make their names famous in Chinese history and literary and political history. So that's a bit of a background. So let me read you some poems of Su Tung Po. This was written in 1061. About 1048 or so, he became very interested in Zen. And in fact, some of his poems are noted. His Enlightenment verse, which we'll get to, is one of the most noted poems in Chinese Zen history. So this is on the statue of Vimalakirti, a clay figure by Yang Hui-chi of the Tong in the Temple of the Pillar of Heaven. Chinese poetry tended to have very long titles, interestingly. They're stories in themselves. So anyway, long ago when Master Yu was sick and dying, and this is from a passage in Shuangzi that describes Master Yu's calm acceptance of death and dragging himself haltingly to the well and looking in, he speculated on what form the Creator intended for him to take next. So that's background. Long ago when Master Yu was sick and dying, his friend Master Su went to visit him. Stumbling to the well, Yu looked in and sighed, "What will the Creator make out of me next?" Now, as I view this old clay image of Vimalakirti, ailing bones, sharp and knobby like a dried-up turtle, I know that a great man is indifferent to life and death, his body changing form, gone with the floating clouds. Most people, yes, they're sturdy and handsome, but though not sick in body, their minds are worn out. This old fellow, his spirit's whole, something solid inside. With quip and laughter he overpowers 1,000 contenders. When he was alive, someone asked him about the Dharma. He bowed his head, wordless, though at heart of course he knew. To this day his likeness sits stolid, never speaking, just as he was in life, nothing added, nothing lost. Old farmers, village wives, never deign to give a glance, though field mice sometimes nibble at his whiskers. Each time I look at him, I'm lost in wonder. Who can be like Vimalakirti, a wordless teacher? So that's on a statue, a clay statue of Vimalakirti with probably straw whiskers. The mice would come and nibble that. Written on Abbot Lun's wall at Mount Cho, this is in 1074, he wrote this. The master stays on Mount Cho, though in fact he's never stayed anywhere. No sooner had I arrived than I asked about the way, but the master never said a word. Not that he was lost for words, he saw no reason for replying. Then I thought, look at your head and feet, comfortable enough in hat and shoes, aren't they? It's like the man with a long beard, who never worried how long it was. But one day, someone asked him, what do you do with it when you sleep? That night, pulling up the covers, he couldn't decide if it went on top or under. All night he tossed and turned, wondering where to put it, till he felt like yanking it out at the roots. These words may seem trite and shallow, but in fact they have deep meaning. When I asked the master what he thought, the master smiled his approval. So let's see. Pear blossoms by the Eastern Palisade, 1077. Pear blossoms, pale white, willows, deep green. When willow fluff scatters, falling blossoms will fill the town. Snowy boughs by the Eastern Palisade set me pondering. In a lifetime, how many springs do we see? In a lifetime, how many springs do we see? Let's see. Here's Held Up 2 Days at Gold Mountain, written in 1079. The bell on the pagoda top talks to itself. High winds tomorrow, no river crossing. Morning and white waves pound the green bank, dashing showers of spray up to our window. Hundredweight ships don't dare put out, but a fishing boat, one leaf, bounces along. Come to think of it, why rush to town? I laugh at rain dragons. Who are they angry at? The servants may wonder why I stay so long, but my family will forgive me with wind like this. The monk of Te-shan, what's he doing? Past midnight, up alone, listening for the gruel call. That is, listening for the sounding board to notify him about breakfast. What he really means is his friend, Xian Liao, the monk of Te-shan, was probably spending the night in Zazen. But he puts it colloquially. The monk of Te-shan, what's he doing? Past midnight, up alone, listening for gruel call, waiting for the morning board to sound the breakfast call. This is presented to Abbot Chan Shung of the East Forest Temple, 1084. Maybe it was the 80s that he really got into Zen, 1084. Now I said 48, but it might have been 84. Anyway, this was his enlightenment verse. Okay, so that's in 1084. Voice of the valley stream, this is his long, broad tongue. The color of the hills, is it not his clean, pure body? Last night you mastered 84,000 verses. Another day, how will you explain them to others? Voice of the valley stream, this is his long, broad tongue. The color of the hills, is it not his clean, pure body? Last night you mastered 84,000 verses. Another day, how will you explain them to others? Okay, so a little introduction to a bit of our Zen culture. One of our ancestors, Su Tung Po. There were so many great Chinese poets, and of the Tong and the Sung, and a lot of our sense of Zen really comes from them. Very straightforward poetry. Any case, now we'll take a look at chapter 5 of Finding Your Buddha's Smile, Coming Home to What Zen is Really All About by myself. The chapter is Te-shan Carries His Lunch Bowls. This third Te-shan koan completes our overview of Zen practice. Maturing, which means more than simply aging, involves becoming not just olders, but elders. The process takes time, effort, and perseverance. Zen tradition calls it the long maturation. Yamada Roshi, Eiken Roshi's final teacher, counseled his Zen students to take care of their health so as to live as long as possible, and by continuing to work on their practice, become as mature and grown-up human beings as possible. Let's see how Te-shan does. A reminder, in ongoing koan practice, we encounter this chronologically final incident, carrying his bowls, first. The second incident, carrying his bundle, we explore last. And the initial incident, carrying his backpack, comes between these two. After bowls, or Lungtam lights his candle, or blows out his candle rather, comes between those two, after bowls and before bundle. In short, the order in practice is bowls, backpack, bundle, a chronological hodgepodge. Recently, someone asked why we meet these koans out of their chronological sequence in the curriculum. I answered that while I didn't actually know, one benefit of this is that it keeps us from forming conceptual frameworks, patternings, or sequencings that might divert us from the essential task of facing each koan nakedly and directly on a path of intimate practice realization. Perhaps the why of it lies there. To recap now, carrying a backpack of brilliant commentaries, the scholar-monk Te-shan boldly set out to rout out the Zen devil's teaching that mind could be realized and Buddhahood attained without dependence. Didn't say not without, but without dependence on words and texts. Brought to a halt by an old woman who asked, past mind cannot be grasped, present mind cannot be grasped, future mind cannot be grasped. With which mind will you enjoy your mind refreshers, that is your tea cakes? What was he going to do? Look it up in a book? Master Lung Tan, Dragon Pond, completed this initial damage by blowing out his candle. In darkness, Te-shan found light, but then, hot-headed as ever, after consigning his cherished writings to the flames, sure now that Zen realization was right and conceptual knowledge wrong, he set off to challenge all comers. In our second koan, he arrived at Te-shan's temple freed of his backpack, but carrying his bundle, which he then metaphorically tossed into the same vast, empty ravine and headed off again, completely exposed to a lonely, isolated peak to scold Buddhas and abuse ancestors. Now, in our third and final Te-shan koan, we catch up with him years later. While still formidable, Te-shan's rod and Lin Chi's shout was an adage in the Zen world. He is clearly mellowed. He's not simply old, he's seasoned, subtle as fine wine. Nothing seems to faze him in the least. When you look at his earlier life, it's quite the transformation. In the first koan, he was on fire, his teeth like fangs and his mouth like a bowl of blood. In this final koan, he's shuffling toward the dining hall, lunch bowls in hand. Discovering he's early, he turns around and shuffles off again. Not a word is spoken. There are no fireworks whatsoever. Then again, is he subtle and refined, or is he mentally wandering and preoccupied? Might he be senile? Let's see what Gateless Barrier Case 13, Te-shan carries his bowls, has to say. So, the case goes like this. One day, Te-shan came to the dining room carrying his bowls. Shui Feng, that would be Seppo in Japanese, asked him, "Where are you going with your bowls? The bell has not rung, and the drum has not been struck." Te-shan turned around and went back to his room. Shui Feng told this to Yento, that would be Gonto in Japanese, who remarked, "Great as he is, Te-shan has not yet grasped the last word." Hearing about this, Te-shan sent for Yento and asked, "Don't you approve of me?" Yento whispered his reply to him. Te-shan said nothing further. The next day when Te-shan took the high seat before the assembly, his presentation was very different from usual. Yento came to the front of the hall, clapping his hands and laughing loudly, saying, "How wonderful! Our old boss has got hold of the last word. From now on, no one under heaven can outdo him." Wu Men's commentary. As for the last word, neither Yento nor Te-shan has ever dreamed of it. When you examine them closely, you find they are just like puppets on a stage. Wu Men's verse, when you realize the first word, you understand the last word. The first word or the last word. It is not a word. It is not a word. Te-shan has descended from his isolated and lonely peak and is now the leader of a large community. Shui Feng, the Tenzo or head cook, an important monastery job, while older than his mentor Yento, was at this time not yet realized or not yet deeply realized. However, Zen tradition tells us that he kept working at his practice, never giving up, and eventually emerged as an important teacher with noted Dharma heirs of his own. In fact, he became widely acknowledged as Zen's archetypal person of effort, the one who keeps going, doggedly keeps at it, never gives up, and so in time attains. In this koan, he's about 40, his Dharma eyes still hazy and self-centered. Yento, who was also known as Zen's archetypal person of talent or genius, not simply effort, was graced from the start with Dharma affinities beyond the ordinary. Already deeply awakened, his potential was manifest from the start. Seemingly without effort, he here makes brilliantly spontaneous use of a minor incident to turn the Dharma wheel, actualizing the Sangha treasure of communal practice. Fast off the mark, he later helped Shui Feng to awake fully. Brilliant though he was murdered by bandits while still rather young, no more than 60, and left no heirs. He himself predicted that he would die with a great shout, which is indeed how it happened. Run through with a sword by bandits, his dying shout, heard from miles, resonated through time. His death became a troubling and persistent natural koan for Hakuin as a young monk in Japan 1,000 years later. It gave him no peace. On and on he struggled with the question of how such a deeply enlightened master could have been murdered. What good was enlightenment if such things could happen to even the deeply realized? When he got to the bottom of it, he shouted aloud, "Yento is alive and well." But what's up with old Te-shan, the monastery's abbot? Challenged by his head cook, Shui Feng, he turns around and silently plods back to his quarters, bowls in hand. When the monks heard about it, did they start whispering, "He's lost it. Maybe it's time we got someone younger to guide us. How about Yento? He's sharp." Is this what Shui Feng might have been thinking? What's going on when he tells his pal and mentor Yento about this interchange with their old teacher? Did he make himself look good, describing how he'd stood up to that old Dharma terror, Te-shan? And what about Yento? Was he making unnecessary trouble with his last word quip? In the two previous Te-shan koans, we saw him also turn around and walk away. So maybe this little scene with his lunch bowls was not totally out of character. If you remember, after his initial awakening, he burned his notes and commentaries and walked away from Lung Tan's dragon pond. At Kuei-shan's, he picked up his bundle, turned his back to the Buddha hall, and headed off again. Now he turns around and, holding lunch bowls, returns to his room. Still, this episode lacks his characteristic vitality. Is he befuddled? Is he embarrassed? Has he lost track of the schedule? Are his eyes so weak he can no longer read changes to the monastery calendar? Is he teaching? If so, what's he teaching? Has this once vigorous and assured Zen adept become a dotard? In The Lord of the Rings, when the hobbits are returning to the Shire after their successful destruction of Sauron and his evil works, they stop at Rivendell to visit the aged Bilbo. Tolkien writes, "They sat much with their old friend. who spent most of his time now in his room, except at meals. For these he was still very punctual as a rule, and he seldom failed to wake up in time for them. Is this where Te-shan is at? And what's up with Shui Feng? Being Tenzo, head cook, is, as mentioned, an important job. The health of the entire monastery, with its hundreds, even thousands of monks, rests in the Tenzo's hands. Nourishing vegetarian food must not only be procured and healthily prepared, but set on the table at the right time each day, all in accord with the monastery's limited budget, too. Plus, wherever food is involved, bad vibes or lax attention could easily put the monks in the infirmary rather than in the zendo. Traditionally, the position of head cook was given to someone grounded and capable, someone who can be trusted to maintain their own practice while competently handling complex, multi-layered issues and stresses. But what's going on with our Tenzo? When the abbot Te-shan showed up early, did Shui Feng think he's losing it? Didn't he notice that the drum announcing mealtime hasn't yet been sounded? Or maybe Shui Feng himself is responsible for the error. Did he goof in estimating the meal's prep time and so hold off striking the drum because it would be late? So maybe Te-shan was on time and the drum delayed. Maybe Shui Feng was not taking responsibility. Still, even if he was running late, no one is supposed to head to the dining hall, not even the abbot, if the drum hasn't yet been struck. Were they then both at fault? Who should eat the blame? When Shui Feng spoke to Yen To, was he trying to keep a hot potato from landing in his own lap? Did he show himself in too generous a light? Was he proud of having stood his ground before their teacher, that Dharma terror and authority figure? And what about Yen To's, our man of talents, response? The old boss, great as he is, doesn't have the last word. What a thing to say! Was he criticizing their teacher, even disparaging him? If so, how would that help? Wouldn't it create division and gossip? The opposite of what they were there to do, practice together, to realize the way? Plus, mightn't it lead younger monks to lose faith in their teacher? Buddhist tradition says that unnecessarily compromising the harmony of the Sangha is a grave error. Did Yen To have his weak spots and immaturities? Did he believe himself wiser than his teacher? Was he ambitious? Did he aim to take over leadership with his pronouncement that Te-shan didn't have the last word? And what did he whisper to Te-shan when summoned to the teacher's quarters? What did he say when asked if he approved of his teacher or not? And what about Te-shan's response to that whisper? Was he saddened, stunned, angry? Did he want to give up, throw in the towel, retire? Might he have been motivated to dig in and attain what had so far eluded him, the momentous last word? Indeed, what is the last word? And how will we ourselves attain and show it? The monks must all have been wondering, what is the last word? If our teacher doesn't have it, who does? Does anyone? What can it be? How can I get it? A community-wide koan has taken hold, gripping them all. Was this Te-shan's genius-level purpose all along? And here's the clincher. How did Te-shan's Te-sho radically differ the next day? What did he do? Did he reveal the last word? If so, what was it? And how did he do it? And why was Yen To so happy? What did Te-shan do that was so different? Getting down to it in a secondary sort of way, how does this case relate to the times in our own lives when we're judged or we're criticized? How do we deal with such things? What does Zen practice offer us at such times? Yet despite all this effort on Yento's part, it seems that neither Shui Feng nor any of the monks came to realization through it. Was it then so much effort in vain, or was it a necessary step on their path of maturing more fully? Wu Men, compiler of the Gateless Barrier, won't let us remain on the outside, looking in on the case as mere observers. His commentary sets us back on the path of practice realization ourselves, removing any hope we might have had of sitting it out and settling for some easygoing version of, wow, what an interesting Zen story, thanks. Instead, he says, as for the last word, neither Yento nor Te-shan has ever dreamed of it. When you examine them closely, you find they are just like puppets on a stage. When you examine them closely, you find they are just like puppets on a stage. When you examine them, that's what we must do. Koans are not teachings. They're not pointers about practice. Dahui burned the printing blocks to cut all that off. Zen begins with the Buddha's own great enlightenment, with the Buddha's unfathomable smile. Koans are designed to help us, like the Buddha himself, to personally awake and to our own degree find that same selfless wisdom, that same ancient smile, and do it now. As he often does in his commentaries and verses, Wu Men insists that this whole complex, confusing case is a farce, nothing of quality, only a meager Punch and Judy show meant to make us laugh. What's he getting at? How is it that even such old worthies as the brilliant Yento and refined and wise old Te-shan are like puppets on a stage? With Wu Men there is always more than meets the eye. He concludes by assuring us that if we seek a nourishing meal, we should chew on this, and it's the verse. When you realize the first word, you understand the last word. The first word or the last word. It is not a word. When you realize the first word, you understand the last word. The first word or the last word. It is not a word. If it's not a word, what is it? If it is a word, how might you say it? Vows of gratitude to our many guides along the ancient way. Old and young, slow and fast, skilled chefs, attentive waiters, those coming early, those arriving late, and those puzzled by what's on the menu. All best to all. Sequenced together in their chronological order, these three koans, drawn from the life of the noted teacher Te-shan, give us a nutshell view of Zen as a journey, taking us from brash immaturity to subtle maturity. But what is maturity? And what is this wise last word that changes everything and makes even someone as gifted as that person of genius, Yento, get up and laugh and clap his hands for joy? What is it really all about? So, though we're early, we'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.